Thank you, folks. Uh, Now we're going to start by Yogeshwar talking about two key concepts of Sankhya and Yoga. Go ahead, Yogeshwar.
Okay. So Sankhya and Yoga, in a way, this brings out the whole philosophy, the way we understand it. So whether you're going to the practical side or you're going to the logical side, this is where you have to decide. Basically, the way we can see Sankhya and Yoga, one would be the logical side of it, yeah, and another would be a practical side. So Sankhya is the logic, and Yoga will be the practical, yeah. And so in Sankhya, what happens is you should be at the center and know everything that is at the peripheral. That is the main concept in Sankhya, and it is admitted from the beginning you should be doing that. Now in Yoga, it starts from another point of view. In Yoga, it starts from focus on one thing at the peripheral. And then after focusing on that one thing in the peripheral, you'll understand what is in the middle, because every other thing in the peripheral will have been extinguished. There will be nothing else in the peripheral. So there are two different ways of getting to the same thing. Now, in Sankhya, where you're directly going into standing at the center and looking at the whole peripheral, sometimes we have to, because not everybody understands it the way you should experience it. So you start by some practice, obviously. Yes.
Mhm.
And those practices is what is called the way of Sankhya.
Mhm.
And even in yoga, there is a practice that you have to put in. So that is the practice of yoga. And these two ways are actually like a coin, and you have two sides of a coin. Now you have the heads and the tail. So you're trying to know the coin from the heads side, that is like Sankhya, and you're trying to know the coin from the tail side, that is yoga. But when you know the coin from any side, like when you hold the coin in your hand from any side, you'll have held the whole coin.
Beautiful.
There will be nowhere that you've held the whole coin. Basically, the whole coin is in your hand, even though you tried to get it from one side, even though
Beautiful.
you only understood one side at the beginning, but you'll understand both sides when you hold the coin in your hand. There are different routes to get to the same point. In a way, they both start from different points and they both get to the same point, because in Indian philosophy, jnana is known as being at the center, staying there. Now, right now, even though we practice Sankhya Yoga, we practice staying at the middle, at the center, we will still do it with the mind, because the mind is not the center.
Mhm.
We should know that. The mind is not the center, but we'll use the mind as a tool to be at the center when we're doing Sankhya practices. Yes?
Yes.
We'll use logic. We'll try to know that we are the center by every logic that we can get. Yeah? So that is Sankhya. And then what yoga does, it also uses the mind. Yes?
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes you'll see it uses the body as well, but the main thing here is the mind.
Mhm.
And the mind body relation is really important in yoga. So the body, you start with the body and then you slowly get to the mind, like how we understand yoga in the Western world today. So they are preparing the body, but they have to get to a state of meditation to the mind. And even that way is right. Practically, in a way, if you are only practical and you can't really be logical, everybody is logical up to some extent, but if you can't be 100% logical, like you can take it to the end, then you need some practices. Like, for example, if I tell you that being angry is bad, yeah? So however much logic I teach you about being angry is being bad, that logic sometimes doesn't help you. You need some practices in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where yoga comes in, yeah? And it is a really important point, which sometimes when we only talk about logic and when we only talk about Sankhya, it is left aside. But in a way, practically, it is important in a practical way of life. Yeah. Now, where Sankhya comes in is you should know what is the end. You should know where we have to reach. And that should, and those practices should not become the main thing in your endeavor. They should reach somewhere. They should reach to the end. And then there are also two schools, this Sankhya and Yoga, and each and every religion in India that you talk about, whether it is Shankaracharya or Ramanujacharya, Nimbarkacharya, they're in one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so Shankaracharya will mainly talk about Sankhya in these chapters 2 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
And Ramanujacharya and Nimbarkacharya will mainly talk about yoga in these chapters.
Mm-hmm.
So each and every religion and each and every school of any discipline in India will talk about these two and will focus on one. Now, the thing is about focusing on one, it is actually important to focus on one, because if you're every time going from one to another, you'll never know the depth of one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to get to the depth of one thing. When you know the depth of one thing, you understand the other as well. Yeah. And that is really important, whereby they focus on one thing and they get the other as well.
Beautiful.
There's no that we shall only stay with one thing. Yeah. And since now this part of Sankhya and Yoga, many people have so many questions, because it's like there are two different paths, but then in a way in our lives, yeah, because we are not totally logical and we are not totally practical. We are both. We are a percentage of both. Like we could be 30% practical and 70% logical. That would be a great scientist, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody who would be 30% logic, 30% logical and 70% practical or emotional, that would be a great musician, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So we are all in between there. We have percentages of both. We can never be 100% of one thing, because even a musician will have a certain type of logic that will follow. You'll also believe in science, yeah? But you see the logic that he's putting in the music, it's like he doesn't need the logic in the music. He doesn't need the logic in what he is doing. The main career is practical rather than logical. And a scientist, his main career is logical, which is like 70% of what he will do in his life. And the 30% will be the practical, because obviously he will also have a wife and he'll have kids and he has to live in this world. So, and us, we are in the middle of all those. We're in the middle now. So we have to take the greatness in both of them. We have to take the greatness in both of them, because we are both. We are not one. Because if we take one, maybe that 30% of practical that we are also, will leave it aside, maybe. If we only talk about the logical part, we have to talk about both parts. And here, Krishna is also saying the same thing, whereby one may be better than the other for one specific person or a group of people in a way, but both will lead to the same thing.
Wonderful.
There's nothing like one will lead to something else and another will lead to something else. They're both to the same thing.
Wonderful. Yogeshwar, is it okay if we take some questions on this? If people have any questions, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Totally fine.
Okay, folks, if you have questions, go ahead and type exclamation mark about Sankhya and Yoga and how they are related to each other and how it's like two sides of the same coin. If you get one of them, well, you get the other, you could hold the whole coin. Try to keep your questions brief. Don't do any commentary, just ask your question and we will go from there. First question by Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. It's almost like the metaphysical and the physical, right? Is that the way of looking at it? Is the logic aspect of it is actually almost kind of the theory, and then the practical aspect of it is the yoga, and is that the relationship, and is it almost the idea of the spirit involved as well?
Go ahead, Yogeshwar.
Okay, now different schools will explain it differently. Like if I'm in a school of yoga, they will also have their own Sankhya part, which will be the 30% Sankhya, but they will base on 70% yoga. And if I'm in a school of Sankhya, I will have 70% Sankhya and 30% yoga in a way. And you'll see in each and every commentary that we have in India, they actually say both are right. Yeah, but they will always put one above the other in a way, because they want people to go in one way, and they know that people that they have near them, so they know the people and they will tell them to go to one side. Now, in a way, let me explain to Joe in a way whereby if I am logical, like if I'm a logical being, I'm more logical than practical, yeah, then somebody will explain to me that Sankhya is everything, and the practical part may just be to take this anger and frustration, just to take away these mere things out of my world, yeah. And that's just the practical part, but the main thing is only being at the center, and that's really right. Now, if I'm in a school of yoga, that the answer to that question will be, because I am a practical being, I will not understand the logic about it. Yeah, and you see here in one of the shlok they say yat just a minute. Just a minute. Yat Sankhe Prapyate Sthanam, the fifth one. Tad Yogera Pigamyate. So that sthanam they're talking about, yeah, is the sthanam they have said in Sankhya. Yes, that's fine. But that's the ultimate, and you can't get there without a base. So yoga will say, this is everything. This is what you have to do. And you'll reach there automatically. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to put some words around that center of being. Just be, and you'll be there. That's what yoga will tell you. So just do it practically, and you will get there. And then Sankhya will tell you, do it logically, and you'll get there.
Let me add something, Joe. I mean, in some way, this is the heart of the whole of Gita, and you will get this point slowly as we go through it. You can see it in the previous adhyayas, previous chapters that we studied. Arjun was saying, Shri Krishna is telling Arjun, do your duty, do what you need to do. That's very important. Okay, that is doing the yoga, that is doing actually taking the action. At the same time, he was saying, Jnana Yoga is important. Jnana Yoga is higher. We looked at, what Jnana is. So that is kind of the Sankhya side. So another way of looking at it is the center and periphery. The Sankhya tries to focus on the center and tries to understand the center as best as they possibly can. Whereas the yoga says that, look, the periphery is also real and it comes from the center. If you do your responsibility in the course of taking the responsibility, doing right action, slowly the center and what it means to be at the center will reveal itself to you through your own experience. Both are two sides of the same coin, the periphery and the center. And following the paths diligently, with devotion, with full confidence, each of them is going to lead you to the same thing. Thank you. Next up is Brian. Brian.
I just had a quick question, because as he was going through, he said that there were two schools. Is that Sankhya and Yoga, or is that something else?
There is that one. Let me give a quick answer to that. We will go into details. What happens is that what he was saying was that different schools of thought in India focus on one or the other. So some of the schools will come at it from the Sankhya perspective. Some of them will come from the yoga perspective. So even the same text that we are studying, like these first 6 adhyaya, if you look at the commentary of Shankara, who comes from the Sankhya tradition, will be talking about the Sankhya in that text. Whereas the other schools will be talking about the yoga in the same text. The beautiful thing about Gita is that it is an integrated work. It has both those. And it has profound thoughts on both of those and the connections of that. So this is fantastic. This is good kind of introductory questions and introductory things. So let's now dive into chapter 5.